I went from sleeping next to a furnace and a water heater every night to closing over $8 million in real estate deals, all within just 9 months. I didn't have any special advantages. I had no degree. I didn't come from money. And in fact, I was in a brand new city, brand new state. Now, if you're somebody in your 20s and you're thinking that success is out of reach, I want to tell you that in just 9 months, if you focus, you can do it too. And in this video, we're going to talk about how exactly that I would do it if I was starting over again and I was in my 20s. Let's get to it. The first thing that I want you to know is that your future is brighter than ever. When I was first getting started, I'll tell you, I was as scared as I think I'd ever been in life. Why? Is because this was at that very moment that I had nobody to lean on. I had my wife, don't get me wrong, but she was looking at me for what are we going to do now, right? Now, she was supporting me mentally, but that didn't pay the bills. And I was always the breadwinner up to that point. Not only that, we had CJ. And my son was 2 years older at this time. And so I remember getting up every single day and I was trying to figure out how do I make something work. At that time, I think I was selling cell phones. So I was on a website called Swappa and I was getting online and I would go find, like, this was before the marketplace became a boom, but I was finding, cell phones. I think it was like iPhone 12, not even at that time. It was probably like iPhone 9s or iPhone 10s. But anyway, I was at that point buying cell phones, taking them to a Flip, I think was the site. It was either Flip or a Swappa. And I was taking them to the site and I was selling them there. And then I was trying to get my real estate business off the ground. But I wound up coming across a book, and I think it was off of a mentor sharing it with me. And he had said, you got to read this book. And the book was Think and Grow Rich. And I remember in that book, it starts talking about you got to have a strong desire. And at this time, I didn't necessarily know what my desire was, but it made me go back to the drawing board. It made me journal it out, and it made me ask myself, what was my desire? Well, my desire was to get my family, more importantly, to get my son out of someone else's home, to be able to get him in a home that we owned, to be able to put my family in a position to where we could have ownership, right? And I hated when I was sitting, in that house. And granted, I'm very blessed that we was able to stay with my wife's aunt. She allowed us to sleep in the basement, which is great. But I knew as I would hear people walking upstairs, and as we had no control when there was kids over and they were partying, and we could hear all of the footsteps, and we're trying to put CJ down to sleep, and he's hearing the footsteps, so he's jumping up. All of these things for us was reason, and for me, more importantly, was reason that I needed to have a stronger desire to get my family into a better situation. And so that was huge for me first and foremost. Now, for you, you have to figure out how do you attach yourself to something externally. So here's what I mean by that. You have to figure out, who are you fighting for? Now you could say, hey, I don't have, a son or a daughter right now, and that's totally okay. But you still have maybe your mom, maybe you have a younger brother or sister, maybe you have your girlfriend or your spouse. You have to figure out, who are you fighting for? Because that's the first thing. The second thing you have to ask yourself is, what are you fighting for? When you put those two things together, you'll come out with a very strong why. And for me, my why was everything around my family and my son. And I knew as well that every single day when I got done with my day, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I had to come home to my son and I had to be able to look him in the eyes, and he says, Dad, you want to play? And one, I had to be ready to play, but two, if I wasn't ready to play or I was tired, I had to have a damn good reason for that. And so that was huge for me. And so I would tell you, number one is figure out your why and make sure that it's attached to something that's external, because that can hold you accountable. The second thing is, you have to figure out, how do you be more resourceful than have the resources? And so for me, I look back on it and I say, when I was first getting my business off the ground, I was doing so many coffee and lunches. I was doing 3 to 5 every single week. I was meeting with bankers. I was meeting with attorneys. I was meeting with insurance agents. And for you, that could be anybody that's influential in your space. So think about it. If you're trying to get out of whatever the rut that you're in, let's even say that you're trying to get a job, for example. Starting a business is great, but let's say, hey, you say, I'm not at the place where I need to start my business right now, and you want to get a job. Well, I would tell you to still go to networking events. Go to networking events and think about, what is the job that you would love to have? I'll tell you first and foremost, everyone is looking for a salesperson, right? And sales is the easiest thing to get in because you just have to understand how to take no. And there's a book out there called Go for No, but then there's other opportunities out there as well, where if you can build relationships and you can understand how to win friends and influence people. Shout out to Dale Carnegie, who wrote that book, another phenomenal book that's helped me along my journey so much. But if you can figure out how to win friends and influence people, you can create sales. And all sales is helping somebody solve a problem. If you have a solution to their problem, you can be compensated in value, whether that's monetary or whether that's access, for helping someone else solve a problem. So most of the time, for me, I remember I was always doing these coffee and lunches, but I was listening to what is a problem that someone else had, whether they were trying to get in front of more real estate agents, whether they were trying to get in front of more investors, whether I was at a networking event and someone else was trying to get a rental property, whether they were trying to fix their credit. It didn't matter. I just needed to hear what was the problem that they had, and then I go solve it. Right? Because I go find someone else who can solve that problem and I connect the two, and that's where the value would come for me. And I did it because I knew that eventually it would be the law of reciprocity, which means that if I continue to give, in return, it will come back to me tenfold. So the takeaway in this is understand you need to be more resourceful than have all of the resources, which means that if someone says, hey, I have this problem, you figure out how you can solve it. And 9 times out of 10, that's going to come from knowing someone else, which means that you got to build your community. Community is everything, especially in this day and age. People want to be connected to more people. And if you can do that, you'll have all of the money in the world. Third thing is I would focus on my leadership skills. And I don't mean that you have to go out and get a team and lead someone else. But what I do mean is that you have to focus on serving other people. There's another book by Simon Sinek, and it's called Leaders Eat Last. And in fact, it's right above here. But Leaders Eat Last, it's a phenomenal book. And so you have to focus on serving first. And the best way that you can do that is by reading. I don't know if you've ever heard, but one of the favorite quotes that I always tell my kids is readers are leaders. So you have to read. Why? Is because reading gives you an expansion of your brain, but it also gives you understanding. Right? I know for me, when I was first getting older, I needed to figure out how did I have more information so I could serve other people. The way that you do that is by reading. There's so many billionaires, there's so many influential people. Anything that you want to learn in life, they've all put it in a book. And that book probably only costs you $5, $10, at max $25. So for $25, you can figure out what all the secrets are. And if you have the foundation, that means that you don't have to start from scratch. Right? It's like the Pareto rule. You take 80% of that foundation and the other 20% is you putting your own spin on it. And a lot of the times that just comes with your own unique gifts. And we all have unique gifts. But if at the end of the day, you don't have the foundation built from the beginning, it won't matter because you'll always feel like you're starting over. But when you read, it gives you understanding. And that's the biggest thing for me. I read so many books. And if you guys want, I'm going to make a video on this of what are the most impactful books that I've ever read in my life that's helped me to, go from losing everything to also being able to build over $7 million in a rental or a real estate portfolio now. So drop a comment below if that's something that you guys would want me to create. But readers are leaders. That's so important. And understanding that even if you don't like to read in a physical sense, you also have audiobooks. You also have podcasts that you can get. You have YouTube. There's so many different variations of videos that you could even look at the subtitles, right? And you could read books that are on audio that are on YouTube. So just understanding that readers are leaders. Another thing that was very impactful for me was I needed to figure out how to be different. My broker had said to me when I was first getting started, he said, money flows to the different, not to the similar. And so when I was getting started in my real estate journey, I was always thinking, how do I be different? Well, the way that I could be different is everyone was talking about retail, buying and selling their personal home. Well, I knew that there is people out there that wanted to learn how to invest in the real estate as well. Because if I could help you to buy and sell your personal home, but I could also help you to invest to make even more money, there was no way you weren't going to be a client for life. And so for me, that was very important. So that was the ways that I was different, because I can go to any networking event and I could tell someone, hey, I'm in real estate. And rather than saying, oh man, hey, I just bought my house 6 months ago. I don't need any help, right? I didn't have to worry about that, because I could say, hey, there's actually, have you thought about investing? Because there is a single family home that, you could probably get some cash flow on, or talking about what the rental market was doing. There were so many different ways that I could come from it, but it all came from me first starting to read, but two, going into podcasts. And the podcast that was very pivotal for me early on in my journey was Bigger Pockets. Shout out to Bigger Pockets. So for you, that could look like a number of different things, but make sure that you get around a community and make sure that you figure out, how can you be different? Money flows to the different, not to the similar. Remember that. And I'll tell you one other nugget. And I definitely know this to be true in my 30s more than I did in my 20s. But failure weighs ounces, regret weighs tons. I would tell you, if you're in your 20s right now, you have to take as many risks as you can, and you can't look back. If you fail, that's okay. But you want to make sure that you gave it everything you got, because in your 20s is the time that you should be taking those risks. So when you're in your 30s, you know what worked and what didn't work, and how do you come back stronger the next time around. Many of people, they shy up and they say, hey, I can't take these risks. You absolutely can, because what's the worst that could happen? That's what you got to ask yourself. And if that worst happens, can I come back from it? 9 times out of 10, it's an absolute yes. Now, your ego, your pride, it might be hurt, but you can absolutely come back from it, especially if you had a big enough why attached to it. The reason why I say that is because most of the time when you're doing something, you're taking a risk, and you can bring other people along on this journey with you, they're going to want to support you. And it's even harder for you to fail at that point, because they're invested into your journey. But this is why I said you got to have a why, because your story will tell it all. Why did you do what you did? And if the business didn't work, that's okay. Because anybody who is successful, whether it's a banker, whether it's another entrepreneur, who, if they've become wildly successful, they understand that, one, it came with risk, and two, that there was failure along the way. And your whole goal is to win the war, not the battle. And right now in your 20s, you're in that battle state. So don't worry about if it doesn't work. And so those are the keys that I want to leave you with today. I want you to understand that, first off, you have to have a why. And that why has to be tied to a strong desire that is external, not internal. Second, you have to be willing to educate yourself. Remember, readers are leaders. Third, you have to build a community. The community you can get to tie into your why, and that's how you'll be able to go faster and further than you ever thought that you would. But again, remember, we always focus on collaboration over competition, and that collaboration comes from community. And the next one, and the biggest one, is you have to take risks, as long as it's a calculated risk. You figure out, what do the numbers look like? You figure out, how successful can I be at this opportunity? You figure out who else has been successful at this that I can ask, would they be willing to mentor me? Or if they're not willing to mentor me, do they have a book? Do they have a podcast? How can I get invested into their community to find other like-minded people? So when I take this risk, I made sure that I mitigated as much as I could of it, so I lessened my chances of failure. But at the end of the day, because I took the risk, it didn't matter, because I didn't have any regrets, right? So that's all I got for this one. Remember, if you are an entrepreneur, or you're somebody who's thinking of becoming an entrepreneur, even if you just have that entrepreneur mindset, you have to understand that we all have a dream, and that dream is so important. You have to continue to feed into that dream. But that dream that you have, without any action, without any risk, without any calculated risk, it'll only merely be a fantasy. And so that's all for this one. But remember what I tell you, in the dream we trust, don't let it be a fantasy. Take action on it. We'll catch you on the next one.